epidemics to vanishing islands, from deforestation to the loss of fertile soils, from water shortages to indigenous sovereignty, from future food production to carbon budgets, and it lays bare the actions of those responsible and the failures of those who should have already shared this information with the citizens of the world. There is still time for us to avoid the worst outcomes. There is still hope, but not if we continue as we are today. To solve this problem, we first need to understand it, and to understand the fact that the problem itself is by definition a series of interconnected problems. We need to lay out the facts and tell it like it is. Science is a tool, and we all need to learn how to use it. We also need to answer some fundamental questions, like, what is it exactly that we want to solve in the first place? What is our goal? Is it to lower emissions, or to be able to go on living as we are today? Is our goal to safeguard present and future living conditions, or is it to maintain a high consumption way of life? Is there such a thing as green growth? And can we have eternal economic growth on a finite planet? Right now, many of us are in need of hope. But what is hope? And hope for whom? Hope for those of us who have created the problem, or for those who are already suffering its consequences? And can our desire to deliver this hope get in the way of taking action, and therefore risk doing more harm than good? The richest 1% of the world's population are responsible for more than twice as much carbon pollution as the people who make up the poorest half of humanity. Perhaps if you are one of the 19 million US citizens or the 4 million citizens of China who belong to that top 1%, along with everyone else who has a net worth of $1,055,337 or more, then hope is perhaps not what you need the most. At least not from an objective perspective. Of course, we hear some progress is being made. Some nations and regions report quite astonishing reductions in CO2 emissions, or at least in the years since the world first started negotiating frameworks for how we manage our statistics. But how do all those reductions hold up once we include our total emissions, rather than carefully managed territorial statistics? In other words, all those emissions that we so successfully negotiated out of these figures. For instance, outsourcing factories to distant parts of the world and negotiating emissions from international aviation and shipping out of our statistics. Which means that we not only manufacture our products by using cheap labor and exploiting people, we also erase the associated emissions that have in reality increased. Is that progress? To stay in line with our international climate targets, we need to get our individual per capita emissions down to somewhere around 1 ton of carbon dioxide a year. In Sweden, that figure currently stands at around 9 tons, once you include consumption of imported goods. In the US, that figure is 17.1 tons, in Canada, 15.4 tons, in Australia, 14.9 tons, and in China, 6.6 tons. When you add biogenic emissions, such as emissions from the burning of wood and vegetation, those figures will in many cases be even higher. And in forestry nations such as Sweden and Canada, significantly higher. Keeping emissions below 1 ton per person a year will not be a problem for the majority of the world's population, since they will only need to make modest reductions, if any, in order to live inside the planetary boundaries. In many cases, they would even be able to increase their emissions quite substantially. But the idea that countries such as Germany, Italy, Switzerland, New Zealand, Norway, and so on will be able to achieve such enormous reductions within a couple of decades without major systemic transformations is naive. And still, this is what the leaders of the so-called global north are suggesting will happen. In part 4 of this book, we will be looking at how that progress is coming along. Some people believe that if they were to join the climate movement now, they would be among the last. But that is very far from true. In fact, if you do decide to take action now, you would still be a pioneer. The final part of this book focuses on solutions and things we can actually do to make a real difference.